You know what I've come to realize? The people who annoy us the most, the ones who make our skin crawl with their arrogance, their neediness, their fake smiles, or their sharp words, they're usually the ones holding up the clearest mirror. It took me a long time to see that. I used to think they were just bad people, or at least people I was better off avoiding, but life doesn't let you avoid those mirrors forever. I remember this guy I used to work with. He was loud, always interrupting others, needing to be the smartest in the room. He drove me crazy. Every time he opened his mouth, I could feel this knot forming in my stomach. I thought I hated him. But the truth? I hated how much he reminded me of a version of myself I was trying to hide. The part of me that also wanted to be seen. The part that felt like if I didn't speak up or prove my worth, I'd disappear. That's when it started hitting me. The things we judge in others are often the parts of ourselves we've pushed into the basement. The shadow, as Jung would call it. Not because we're evil or broken, but because somewhere along the line we were told, this part of you is not lovable. So we buried it. But shadows don't stay buried. They show up in strange ways, in jealousy, in blame, in overreactions to people who haven't really done anything wrong. They show up in our relationships, in the way we parent, in the quiet resentment that lingers in our friendships. They show up because they want to be seen, because the soul, even the parts we're ashamed of, just wants to be accepted, and that's the part that hurts the most. Realizing that I had spent years trying to be someone I wasn't, trying to be agreeable, calm, likable. But inside, I was angry, I was envious, I was scared of being invisible, and instead of owning that, I projected it onto other people. One night, I couldn't sleep. I had just gotten into a fight with someone I cared about, and I couldn't stop replaying what I had said, the way I had snapped, the look on their face. I lay in the dark and whispered to myself, "What's wrong with me?" And then this thought came in, soft but clear. Maybe nothing is wrong. Maybe something is just hurting. That was the first time I allowed myself to get curious instead of judgmental, to ask, what am I really feeling beneath all this? And when I did, the answer wasn't rage, it was grief. It was the grief of all the years I had tried to be someone else, the grief of parts of myself I had abandoned to be accepted, to be safe. I think most of us carry that kind of grief. It hides behind our perfectionism, our criticism of others, our need to stay busy or in control, and we think we're just being strong or put together, but really, we're just scared to be seen, fully seen. Because what if the real us isn't good enough? But here's the twist. The more I looked at those ugly, uncomfortable parts, the more human I felt. And oddly, the more compassion I had, not just for myself, but for other people. Because when you realize that everyone is carrying something unseen, it softens you. You stop needing to be right all the time. You stop needing to prove anything. It doesn't make the pain go away, it just makes it less lonely. So now when someone triggers me, when I feel that familiar spike of irritation or defensiveness, I try, and I don't always succeed, but I try, to ask myself, what part of me is feeling unseen or rejected right now? And sometimes the answer is surprising. Sometimes it's a part of me I haven't spoken to in years. The little girl who felt like she had to be the peacemaker. The teenager who was too scared to show how much she cared. The adult who's still learning how to set boundaries. I'm not saying it's easy. Shadow work is like opening a door to a room you've kept locked for decades. It's dark and musty in there. It smells like regret and shame. But once you turn on the light, you start to see that it's not as terrifying as you thought. There are pieces of you in there. Beautiful, wild, tender pieces, just waiting to come home. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not fixing ourselves, but gathering the parts we thought we had to exile in order to be loved. bringing them back into the light, saying, I see you, you're allowed to be here too. That's where I'm at now, still learning, still fumbling, still holding up mirrors, even when I don't want to, but slowly, slowly becoming more whole. And I want that for you too. It's strange how early we learn to turn against ourselves. When I really think about it, I can trace so much of my inner conflict back to this quiet, invisible pressure, the one that told me, you can't be like that. Not outright, not loud, but subtly. In the raised eyebrow when I got too excited. In the tight smile when I asked too many questions. In the way love felt just a little bit further away when I showed too much of who I really was. So I started editing myself, bit by bit, softening my voice, shrinking my needs, hiding my anger, pretending not to care when I really did. I didn't even realize I was doing it. It just felt safer, more acceptable. And at first, it worked. People liked me. I got praise for being so mature, for being easy to be around. I wore those compliments like armor, but underneath, I was disappearing. Slowly and silently, I was becoming a stranger to myself. You see, when you're constantly trying to live up to an image of the good daughter, the strong friend, the unbothered adult, something inside you starts to die. Not in a dramatic, movie-worthy way, but in a slow, aching way that makes life feel heavy and flat. You're alive, technically, you're functioning, but you're not really living. And the worst part, you don't even realize it until the numbness becomes unbearable. That's what happened to me. I hit this wall where no amount of productivity or people-pleasing could distract me from the hollowness. I was tired, not in the way sleep could fix, but in the way that comes from carrying a version of yourself that isn't really yours. A self built out of expectations, survival strategies, and fear of being too much. I started to ask myself questions I had avoided for years. Who am I when I'm not performing? What do I want when I'm not trying to be what everyone else needs? And what am I so afraid will happen if I show the real me? The answers didn't come all at once. They came in whispers, in quiet moments, in tears I couldn't quite explain. I realized I had internalized so many shoulds. I should be calm, I should be grateful, I should be successful, I should be over it by now. But none of those shoulds had room for my humanity, no room for my rage, my messiness, my confusion, no room for the part of me that didn't want to hold it all together anymore. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't healing. I was managing my image, managing my emotions, managing other people's comfort. But true healing doesn't happen in control. It happens in surrender. It happens when you stop trying to be good and start trying to be honest. And being honest, for me, meant admitting things I didn't want to face. That sometimes I resented the roles I played, that I was lonely, even in a room full of people, that I didn't always like the person I had become, not because I was bad, but because I wasn't me. I had spent so much energy rejecting the parts of myself that felt inconvenient or too much. But in doing that, I had rejected the very parts of me that made me real. My hunger, my grief, my longing, my wildness. There's this myth that if we can just fix ourselves enough, we'll finally be worthy of love. But what if love isn't found in perfection? What if it's found in the broken, breathing truth of who we really are? That idea terrified me at first, because if I stopped performing, if I stopped managing everyone's perception of me, what would be left? Would I still be loved? Would I even be seen? And yet, there was also this tiny, persistent hope that maybe, just maybe, the love I was really craving was my own. I don't mean the kind of self-love that's plastered on Instagram posts. I mean the raw, trembling kind, the kind that says, even if no one else claps for you, I won't leave. I'll be here. So I started showing up for myself in small, imperfect ways, letting myself cry when I needed to, saying no even when my voice shook, admitting when I was tired or scared or didn't have the answers. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't always graceful, but it was real, and little by little I felt something shift. The self I had buried, the one with sharp edges and tender spots, started coming back to life. Not to cause chaos, but to tell me, I'm still here, and you don't have to earn your place. That was the beginning of liberation, not from others, but from the prison I had built inside myself, a prison made of shoulds, fear, and the lie that I had to be someone else to be safe. And if you've ever felt like you're suffocating inside your own skin, I just want you to know you're not alone, and there's a way out. Not by becoming someone better, but by becoming you, the real you, the one who's been waiting. There's a kind of silence that doesn't bring peace, it brings fear. That thick, empty quiet where you're sitting alone with yourself and suddenly nothing feels real anymore. You look around at your life, your job, your apartment, the friends you text, the plans in your calendar, and it all feels like someone else's story, like you woke up in the middle of a movie you forgot auditioning for. That's where I was. Everything was technically fine. Nothing catastrophic had happened, but I couldn't shake this aching, hollow feeling, like something vital had slipped out of my hands, and I didn't even know what it was. I remember one morning sitting at the edge of my bed, holding a coffee cup like it was an anchor. The sun was shining, my inbox was full, my phone buzzed with messages, and all I could think was, is this it? Is this all there is? It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It was more like nothingness, a slow, creeping numbness that made even the smallest decisions, what to eat, who to call, feel exhausting. I didn't want to die, I just didn't know how to keep living like this, going through the motions, performing stability, smiling when I felt disconnected, achieving goals that didn't feed my soul. And the scariest part, no one knew, not even the people closest to me. I had become a master at keeping it together. I wore my competence like camouflage, but inside I was unraveling. That's when I started reading again, not self-help books or productivity hacks, but philosophy, psychology, anything that felt like someone else had asked these same impossible questions. That's how I stumbled across Viktor Frankl, and this one sentence hit me like a thunderclap. Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. And it cracked something open, because that was it. That was the ache I couldn't name. The why was missing. The meaning. The sense that my life was mine and not just a series of tasks, or roles or expectations. We don't talk about this enough. How meaninglessness can feel like slow death. How it doesn't announce itself dramatically, but seeps into your bones until you forget what joy even feels like. Until just getting through the day becomes your only goal. I started to ask myself hard questions. What do I actually value? What would I still choose, even if no one clapped for it, even if it didn't impress anyone? The answers were slow. They came with a lot of silence and more than a few nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was just broken. But eventually I started to realize that I had been living a life built around survival, not expression, around obligation, not connection. And the truth is, we can survive for a long time without meaning. We can stay busy, entertained, distracted. But eventually the soul protests. It says, I didn't come here just to function. I came here to feel, to grow, to become. It's a hard place to be, the in-between, when you no longer want the life you've built, but you're terrified to tear it down. When the path ahead is unclear and the voices around you are saying, you should be grateful, others have it worse, you're just overthinking. But there's a deeper voice, quieter but truer. It says, this ache is sacred. Don't run from it. It's not a problem. It's a doorway. That's when I began to see the emptiness, not as punishment, but as invitation. The blank space wasn't a failure, it was a canvas. And if I could sit with it, really sit with it, without rushing to fill it with noise or plans, maybe something true would emerge. I stopped pretending I had answers. I let go of the pressure to be okay. And in that surrender, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. Not about what I should be doing, but about who I actually was. I started journaling without censorship. I let myself write down things I wasn't proud of, fears, regrets, confessions, and buried underneath all of it was this quiet, consistent longing to feel alive again, not productive, not impressive, alive. And slowly, painfully, I realized that aliveness doesn't come from fixing yourself. It comes from reconnecting with what moves you, what breaks your heart open, what makes you lose track of time, what scares you, not because it's wrong, but because it matters. Meaning isn't something you find out there, it's something you build inside, moment by moment, choice by choice. And it often starts with a breakdown. The collapse of a life that was never really yours to begin with. So if you've ever felt that emptiness, if you're sitting in that heavy silence wondering what went wrong, maybe nothing did, maybe you're just waking up. And that is not failure. That is the beginning of something real. There's something no one really tells you about healing. It often starts with a breakdown that looks like failure but is really an invitation to finally listen. For a long time, I avoided silence. I filled it with podcasts, music, texts, plans, anything to keep the stillness away, because I knew, deep down, that if I sat with it too long, something inside me would start speaking, and I wasn't ready to hear what it had to say. But eventually, the distractions stopped working. I was exhausted from pretending, from holding up this image of myself that was always fine, always handling it. I couldn't outrun my own loneliness anymore. That's when it came. Not like a thunderstorm, but like fog, thick and slow. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't laugh the way I used to. The days bled into each other. It felt like I was walking through molasses, weighed down by something I couldn't name. It was depression, though I didn't want to call it that. I thought depression meant lying in bed all day, crying uncontrollably. But for me, it was more like absence of color, of energy, of desire. And I remember reading this line from Jung that stopped me cold. Depression is like a woman in black. If she turns up, don't shoo her away. Invite her in, offer her a seat, and listen to what she has to say. That changed everything. I started to treat the depression not as an enemy, but as a messenger, a guest, unwelcome maybe, but meaningful. She wasn't here to destroy me. She was here to reveal something I hadn't been willing to face. So I let myself stop running. I stopped trying to be productive. I stopped trying to be inspiring or interesting or good. I just was. And in that quiet, things began to rise up. Memories, fears, old grief I thought I'd outgrown, anger I had buried so deep it had turned into shame. And for the first time, I didn't push it all away. I sat with it. I listened. There was one night I'll never forget. I was lying on the floor in the dark, not even crying, just breathing. And this thought came, not from my brain, but from somewhere deeper. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was that inner child. Maybe it was the part of me I had abandoned, the one who used to feel everything so deeply, who was told she was too much and learned to shrink. I started speaking to her, not out loud, but in my heart. I told her I was sorry for leaving her alone for so long, for demanding she be strong when she was scared, for silencing her just to be accepted. And that's when I realized this part of me, the one I'd hidden away, wasn't the problem. She was the key. All those parts we try to exile, the needy one, the angry one, the fearful one, they don't need to be erased. They need to be seen, heard, held, not fixed, just loved. That was a huge shift for me. I stopped seeing my emotions as something to manage and started seeing them as something to understand. Not every feeling needed to be acted on, but every feeling deserved a seat at the table. It's wild how much power there is in simply allowing yourself to feel, not analyzing, not explaining, just feeling. It's like the body knows what it needs to release if we'd only get out of its way. And slowly, so slowly, things began to move. The fog didn't vanish overnight, but I noticed flickers of light. A song that made me tear up. A walk that didn't feel pointless. A laugh that surprised me. Small signs of life returning. Not because I beat the depression, but because I let it speak. And what it told me was this: you are tired of hiding. You are tired of holding it all alone. You are ready to be whole, not just polished. So many of us walk around pretending, smiling through pain, performing okayness. But I think what we're really craving is to be seen, not for who we pretend to be, but for who we really are, mess and all. And I want you to know something. If you're in that dark place too, it doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're weak. It might mean you're finally ready to stop performing, ready to meet the version of yourself you left behind. It's not pretty work, but it's sacred, because that shadowy part of you, she's not your enemy. She's your lost sister, your wounded protector, the one who stood guard when you couldn't. And she's been waiting patiently for you to come back home. So go gently, don't rush. Let the silence speak, let the sorrow breathe. You're not falling apart, you're falling into yourself. There's this idea we carry, maybe we were taught it, maybe we picked it up just by watching the world, that pain is something to be avoided, like it's a mistake. Like if we were doing life right, we wouldn't feel so much. But that's a lie. Pain isn't the problem, it's the signal, the messenger, the fire that burns away the illusions we've been clinging to. And I didn't understand that, not until the pain I had been pushing down finally pushed back. I was always the one who held it together. Even when I was falling apart inside, I knew how to smile, how to distract, how to pretend. But your body keeps the score. Your soul keeps receipts. You can't outrun what wants to be felt. One night I broke, not in some dramatic Hollywood kind of way. I didn't throw things or scream. I just sat there in the middle of my kitchen floor and I felt everything all at once. The grief of being unseen, the rage I had swallowed for years, the ache of trying so hard and never feeling like it was enough, the shame, God, the shame, for feeling like maybe the reason I was struggling was because something in me was defective. And for the first time, I didn't try to push it away. I didn't try to be strong. I let it wash over me like a storm I couldn't control. And in that surrender, something shifted. Because under all the noise, all the fear, there was this small, steady truth rising up inside me. You are allowed to hurt. It sounds so simple, but it broke something open in me. Because I had spent most of my life trying to earn love by being okay, by being low maintenance, by not needing too much. And here I was, crumbling, and still worthy of love. The pain wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. It was showing me all the places I had abandoned myself, all the ways I had prioritized harmony over honesty, image over integrity, and most of all, it was showing me that I didn't need to be better to be worthy. I just needed to be real. That's what shadow work really is, I think. Not fighting the darkness, but letting it teach you. Sitting with the feelings you were taught to fear. The ones you were told made you broken, unlovable, dramatic, too much. When I stopped resisting the pain, it became something else. It became clarity. I started seeing myself more clearly. Not the edited version, but the full picture. The parts of me that were fierce and fiery. The parts that longed for connection. The parts that were still tender from old wounds that had never been named. And strangely, I began to feel stronger. Not because I had overcome the pain, but because I had integrated it. I had learned to carry it differently. to hold it like a compass, not a curse. It taught me what I truly valued, what I would no longer tolerate, where I had betrayed myself just to feel accepted. And it gave me the courage to start living in alignment, not with what others wanted, but with what I knew was true in my bones. And that's the thing about pain. When you let it shape you, it doesn't just make you softer, it makes you sharper, more discerning, more alive. You begin to recognize the difference between comfort and peace, between performing love and receiving it, between being liked and being seen. I stopped apologizing for my intensity. I stopped shrinking to fit into rooms that couldn't hold me. I stopped begging for crumbs of approval from people who were never really listening, not because I was angry, though yes, there was anger, but because I finally saw my own worth, not the curated, palatable version, but the raw, full-hearted truth of who I am. And I want to say this to you: if you're hurting right now, don't run from it. I know it's tempting. I know the world tells us to numb it, fix it, hide it. But the truth is, the only way out is through, and the deeper you go, the more gold you'll find buried beneath the rubble. Because pain doesn't come to punish you. It comes to awaken you, to peel back the layers of who you thought you had to be, and reveal who you've been all along. You are not broken. You are becoming. And this pain, it's not the end. It's the fire that's forging you into someone freer, braver, and more you than ever before. There's a quiet revolution that happens inside you when you stop trying to return to the person you used to be and instead start becoming someone new, someone truer. I didn't notice it all at once. In fact, it came so subtly that I almost missed it. Just small shifts at first. I stopped pretending to be interested in conversations that drained me. I started saying, "I don't know," instead of pretending I had it all figured out. I listened more, not just to others, but to myself. And then one day, I looked around and realized the life I had been building wasn't mine anymore. Maybe it never really was. That realization hit hard. I had spent years climbing ladders, chasing milestones, fitting into spaces that looked impressive on the outside. But inside, I was a stranger in my own story. It was terrifying, because if I let go of that life, that image, those expectations, what was left? Who would I be without all the roles I had worked so hard to perfect? And yet, there was also relief, because I was so tired of performing. There's this idea Jung talked about, the persona. It's the mask we wear to function in society. It helps us survive. But the danger is, if we wear it too long, we start to believe that's all we are. We forget that beneath the mask is something wild and alive, the real self, the one that doesn't need to be liked to belong. That's where I was, standing at the edge of who I had been, staring into the unknown of who I was becoming. It felt like waking up from a dream, one where I had been living on autopilot, smiling at the right moments, working hard, staying busy, being good. But underneath it all, I wasn't living. I was just complying. And the cost of compliance is always authenticity. So I started dismantling the performance, carefully, painfully, one piece at a time. I stopped chasing people who only loved the mask. I walked away from paths that no longer made sense, even if they looked successful. I began to choose peace over performance, connection over validation. I won't lie, it was lonely at first. When you stop being who others want you to be, not everyone claps. Some people leave, some get confused, some push back, because your change threatens their comfort. But you know what? The people who stay, the ones who see you, really see you, those are the ones worth building your life around. And more importantly, you begin to stay. You stop abandoning yourself to keep the peace. You stop editing yourself to fit into someone else's idea of enough. That's freedom, not the kind that comes from rebellion, but the kind that comes from alignment, from living in a way that makes your soul exhale. I started making choices from a new place, not fear, not obligation, but truth. I asked myself, If no one else was watching, what would I still choose? I let go of the hustle to be understood. I stopped trying to explain my healing to people who hadn't even begun their own. I realized that I didn't owe anyone a version of me that made them comfortable, and with every choice that honored my truth, I felt lighter. It wasn't always easy, but it was honest. And that honesty, that raw commitment to living as who I really am, became my compass. Because here's the truth, most of us are never taught. You don't need to be anything other than what you are. Your value isn't in your productivity, your success, your image. It's in your presence, your heart, your wholeness. There's a whole world inside you that's been waiting to be lived, not for applause, but for peace, not to impress, but to feel. And maybe the breakdown you're facing, the confusion, the aching, maybe it's not a failure, maybe it's your soul rejecting the script. Maybe it's the moment you finally decide to write your own. You don't need permission. You just need to remember that you get to choose. This life, your real life, begins the moment you stop performing and start belonging to yourself. I used to think healing would make me into someone new, someone softer, wiser, more enlightened, someone who always knew the right thing to say, who never got triggered, who woke up every morning with glowing peace and purpose. But that's not how it works. Healing didn't make me new, it made me whole. And wholeness, I've learned, isn't about getting rid of your darkness. It's about learning to hold it without shame. It's about bringing all of you to the table, the light and the shadow, the grace and the grit, the fear and the fire, and saying, you all belong. It's wild how different life feels when you stop trying to split yourself in two. There was a time when I thought the goal was to fix myself, to become some perfect version who never felt insecure, never lost her temper, never doubted her path. But the more I tried to be that person, the further I drifted from who I actually was. And now, I don't want to be perfect. I want to be real. That means I still get things wrong. I still have messy days. I still forget what I've learned and fall back into old patterns. But now I catch myself with compassion, not contempt. I apologize to myself the way I would to a dear friend. I forgive myself out loud, because I'm not chasing some ideal anymore. I'm inhabiting my truth. That's what it means to be free, not to never fall, but to know you'll meet yourself gently when you do. And strangely, the more I accept myself, not just the shiny parts, but the whole spectrum, the more deeply I connect with others, because people feel it when you're being real. They exhale around you, they open up, they soften. You become a mirror that reflects permission to be raw, to be human, to be enough, even in your becoming. I've stopped needing everyone to understand me. I've stopped shrinking to avoid making others uncomfortable. I've stopped chasing relationships that only love me in fragments. Now I choose alignment over approval, peace over performance, truth over image. And yes, sometimes that means standing alone, but I'd rather stand in my integrity than sit at a table where I have to hide myself, because the cost of pretending is too high. And the reward for showing up as you are, it's everything. It's waking up and recognizing your reflection without flinching. It's holding space for your past without drowning in it. It's moving through the world knowing that you are not broken. You are becoming. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to outgrow people, patterns, entire identities. You're allowed to start again and again and again. Because this isn't a linear journey, it's a spiral. You'll revisit the same lessons from different angles, but each time you'll bring more compassion, more clarity, more courage, and eventually you'll look back and realize you didn't just survive, you returned, not to who you used to be, but to the version of you that was always waiting beneath the noise, the one who never needed to be fixed, only loved, remembered, and invited home. And maybe that's the whole point, not to become someone else, but to become yourself fully. Finally,